Hey there, this is Phil. Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Sky Jitani.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, Sky. And Christian Taylor.
Hey, Phil.
You're going with fall colors, I noticed, the last couple of weeks.
I really wrestled because it's not Labor Day yet.
I know it's not Labor Day, and it's 90 degrees out.
I know, and I was going to wear white just to go out with a bang.
Yeah.
But I know it's not good.
People are going to see this after Labor Day.
That's true. Good point. So look at this. I have on maroon pants.
Maroon pants.
And a green shirt.
What green is that? That's a moss green. Olive green?
Olive green.
Okay.
And then did you see my daisy necklace?
Oh, daisies. Yeah. Well, that's kind of summer.
I got it in Assisi. Oh, yeah, daisies in my hair, too. See, they're sparkly. I was going with the daisy thing today.
Sparkly daisies in her hair. Sky, why don't you have sparkly daisies in your hair?
You don't know that I don't.
He has no hair. That should be a song.
Be on my chest.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. And Christian, too.
Hi, Phil. He seems very disinterested today.
Much peppier.
He's on his phone.
Sorry.
We got no guest. We don't need one here for you.
Woohoo!
Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Okay.
I just want to say one thing.
What do you want to say?
I heard we lost a listener. Apparently, we lost a listener because...
I'm sure we've lost numerous listeners
I'm sure
over
we
the
have
years.
too. I guess we're a little challenging on some Christian leaders. I'm thinking it's what we've been saying about Franklin Graham.
I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't said anything about Franklin Graham
I don't
ever.
know either.
He's my favorite.
We have lost the bottomless pant lobby, however. Who else may we have lost over the
Topless
years?
lobby?
The topless lobby, the bottomless lobby.
The never say nipple on the air lobby.
Yeah,
I'm going to say nipple just so that everybody knows I don't have a problem with
You've
it
broken
anymore.
the nipple barrier.
I've broken the nipple barrier.
Okay.
That's impressive. Okay, Kim Davis is in jail.
Who is Kim Davis?
Oh, yeah.
And several listeners requested that we address it.
Who is it?
Kim Davis is the county clerk of a county in Kentucky who refuses to write wedding marriage licenses for same-sex couples, even though it is the law of the land. And she's now in jail.
Wow.
She's not in jail for not writing same-sex marriage licenses. She's in jail for contempt of court.
Right.
Because she filed, she sued or she was sued. Anyway, it went to court. She lost.
She had to have been sued.
She was
and
sued.
then
She
lost.
was sued. She lost. She appealed. She lost. She appealed. She lost.
Okay.
But she still won't write marriage licenses.
So she's in contempt of court.
So she's in contempt of court. Yeah. I wasn't planning on bringing it up because I don't consider it that much of a story. But it's probably worth talking about because of how it will be used in some circles of outrage.
It is being used. I'm amazed as I go around the internet. I'm just seeing it everywhere. And it's from both sides.
Yeah.
On one side, she's a martyr. On the other side,
I think it's kind of cut and clear. Doesn't the Bible say that we are to respect our leaders and the law of the land?
But what if the law is unjust?
And which has happened quite frequently.
What if the law says to gather up all the Jews and deliver them to the Nazis?
That would be a problem.
Yeah. But the issue is, if you are the clerk of your county and you find you cannot perform the responsibilities of the office, shouldn't you resign?
And the problem is she can't be fired because she's actually an elected official.
Right.
So she would need to resign.
Or be impeached, which the Republican-controlled House in Kentucky refuses to do.
Right.
To make
so why doesn't she resign? She's just trying to make a point?
Here's the part. I was listening to this. I had a long drive this week, and I was on the radio listening to people talk about this. And here's what I don't understand. She has said that God's law doesn't allow for same-sex marriage, and she must abide by God's law, and she takes it very seriously, and she's a Christian, and kind of that whole thing. And
that whole Christian thing.
That whole Christian thing. And theologically, I would agree with her in this respect. Her critics, however, are pointing out the fact that she has, in fact, been married 4 times and divorced 3 times, which means, in their eyes, she clearly doesn't take God's law about marriage.
Well, she's selective in what she...
Selective outrage, which I have heard repeatedly by associates of mine in the LGBT leadership community. When they see Christians have selective outrage about marriage issues, they rack it up to bigotry.
Right.
Because if you're not outraged about divorce, then and you are outraged about same-sex marriage, it's not because you take the Bible seriously, it's because you are just bigoted toward LGBT people. So she's not exactly the best martyr on this issue because of her own choices or past.
Right.
But, I mean, and again, the big question is why, if you really want to play the martyr in this, why not resign your role and say, I can no longer serve my government in this way because I disagree with them?
This appears more like anarchy than martyrdom, of just ignoring the law. And also, she's directed her employees, the assistant clerks, that they are not allowed to write marriage license either, even if it's not a violation of their conscience.
Right, but that changed today. Did you see that?
Well, she's in jail.
She's in jail. 5 of the 6 clerks now say they will because they don't have any problem with it.
Right.
Except one won't still, and he happens to be her son.
Oh, her son works for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so other states have had the same issue because they knew that this was coming, and they knew that they would have county clerks that would feel it was a violation of conscience. So, for example, Utah, do you know what Utah did? Do you know that Utah is fairly religious?
Well, yes, but mostly Mormon.
That counts as religious?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Do you know what Utah did? Because they saw this coming from a mile away.
Let me think about it for one second.
Okay, you get 1 second.
I don't know for a fact what they did, but my guess is they amended some sort of law so that it would resolve the problem.
They made some kind of accommodation.
Yes, that's what I was looking for.
An interesting answer. I'm not sure.
Hey, I'm not wrong.
I'm not sure you actually said anything.
No,
but
I'm not wrong. Did they amend the law or make an accommodation?
They made an accommodation.
See,
There
I'm
you
not
go.
wrong. I'm right.
Yeah,
I just am not
Okay.
specific.
Well, I'm not sure what the alternative would have been: seceding from the union, or
I don't know.
anyway. They passed a law that says if you are a county clerk and this violates your conscience, you personally can abstain from issuing marriage licenses as long as someone else in the office is available to do so.
which strikes me as being radically common sense.
Agreed.
You know,
It
my
is.
common sense is tingling when I hear that.
It is
It's just-
rather.
yeah.
Your common sense tingles?
Yeah, like my spidey sense.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
I really like that.
Where do you feel the tingle when it's your common sense?
It depends what it's about.
Because like spidey sense is kind of back of the neck,
Is
right?
it really?
Isn't it back of the neck for spidey sense?
I don't know.
Okay.
Do you have it? I guess not.
Sometimes.
Sometimes?
Occasionally I have spidey sense. So Utah,
Good on you, Utah.
good on Utah. Utah said, "Hey, let's head this off at the pass. Let's do something before we're
but
even
here's
there."
the difference between Utah and the rest of the world. So that means that they have a lot of people in positions of power
Yeah.
to make amendments or accommodations because they all hold the same world view and are
Well,
basically
there's
more uniformity.
Probably a little more homogeneity in belief in Utah, but then in Kentucky, I don't
But
know
here's
that-
the thing. I mean, a couple years ago, I was at a thing. I can't get into the details. It was off the record, but there was a
Ooh, very mysterious. Hush,
there,
hush.
there was a government official from Utah,
Which part of you tingled when you were there?
also off the record.
Quit.
Anyway,
Focus.
He was talking about how Utah was, and this is years ago, probably before any state had passed same-sex marriage. Maybe Massachusetts had. And Utah was getting ahead of the curve and beginning to pass reasonable civil liberties for LGBT people, like housing laws and employment laws and things like that. And they were bringing together religious leaders and LGBT leaders to make sure these laws not only protected gay folks, but also made accommodation for religious liberty. And everyone worked together, and this is particularly in Salt Lake City, to make sure this was common sense legislation. But now what we have in so much of the country, because clearly the LGBT side has won the battle in the court, is they don't feel any compulsion to bring religious leaders to the table as they draft legislation, and it's kind of a winner-take-all. So Utah, I think, for the last number of years, has been pretty smart in how they've gone about this.
Sounds like it.
By rather than saying it's a scorched earth, winner-take-all battle, we're going to work together and come up with common sense solutions.
Bring everybody to the table right now and get ahead of this. The lawyers representing Mrs. Davis I was going to say miss, but she's been married at least 4 times.
Yeah,
so
but twice to the same guy.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
My aunt did that,
Is that like reincarnation?
kind of.
A marriage reincarnates? It's a Hindu marriage.
Focus.
Okay. Anyway, what was I saying?
You were saying,
Oh, her lawyers,
Yeah.
which
Yes.
are one of the Christian legal defense funds,
Yeah.
is defending her, have said, and this is their statement and their PR spin, for the first time in American history, someone is in jail because of their religious beliefs.
well, so
Pretty
they're
sure that's not the case.
so they're expanding. They're expanding it even farther.
They're saying that this is all about her religious belief. You gotta disagree. She's not in jail because of her religious belief. She's in jail for contempt of court. She's in contempt of court because she's refusing to
do her
fulfill the oath that she took when she took office, which was to uphold the law of the land. She doesn't like the law of the land. See, and that's what I would say, that's where you're getting into anarchy.
Right.
To say, let's live under the law
As long
unless
as we
you don't
agree.
like it.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, ignore it. Obviously, you could say, here's how I would relate it. Because we may have some listeners who are saying, but that's, it's a religious freedom. This is a religious freedom issue. If you work at a restaurant that serves alcohol, and you don't believe in serving alcohol, it offends your religious beliefs, the solution is not necessarily to refuse to give people the drinks they've ordered. The solution is to work somewhere else.
right.
I mean, you signed up for that job. Now you could say, yeah, but when I signed up for the job, they didn't have their alcohol license yet. But and she's only been in the job because this is a new law. She's only been in the job a few months.
Mm-hmm.
So when she was running for office, this case was already before the Supreme Court. It was already fairly likely that would become the law of the land. So it's most likely she already saw this coming and had this idea in mind before she took office, that she was going to stage kind of a one-woman coup of the county clerk. Now, there are many other county clerks that also don't want to do this. I just read in South Carolina, out of 650 counties, 40, the county clerk will not issue marriage licenses, but will provide someone else to do so.
An accommodation again.
Yes,
which
an
makes,
accommodation.
again, total common sense.
And the thought is right now legally that those positions will probably stand, that you can do that.
Yeah.
You can say, I won't hand you the piece of paper, but Fred here will, because it's against my personal, but it's when you take your personal view.
But here's the thing.
And say, I won't even let Fred. So this is what she was doing was the equivalent of someone who doesn't believe in the consumption of alcohol, not only refusing to deliver an alcoholic drink to their customer that just ordered one, but preventing anyone else from delivering the drink.
Right.
Stopping, even though the other waiters or waitresses don't have that same conviction, she's blocking them from their table. And you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing the job you signed up to do.
Well, and it's a little worse when you go home and then have a drink.
Are you saying that she's same-sex married?
No, I'm just saying
When you violate God's law.
when your principle is what God says about marriage in the Bible is my conviction and I will live by it, but then you're only taking part of it and not another. And I'm not saying all divorce is wrong. I mean, it's a very complicated issue, but she's not the best spokesperson to represent this whole thing.
And there seems to be an
But
easier way
again,
around
at
it.
the end of the day, how does this help? In the big picture, in the public debate, this does nothing but divide.
This is, I want America to conform to what I believe.
Right, which ultimately is selfishness, pride, and ego.
So here's my question. Let's turn
And misplacing your hope. It's like misplacing your hope and thinking that, this country, this government, or whatever is going to,
just be about you.
well, be redeemed and and this is what it's supposed to be.
It's heaven on earth.
Right, we're going to make it this
the
way.
New Jerusalem.
Okay, well, let's turn the tables a little bit and change the scenario.
Do it.
What's her name again?
Her name is Kim Davis.
Kim Davis. Imagine instead of Kim Davis in Kentucky, the county clerk in Ann Arbor, Michigan is.
That's a liberal county, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like Michigan
it's a college town.
has a lot of large Muslim population.
Oh, Dearborn, Michigan.
Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ann Arbor is University of Michigan.
So let's say the county clerk there, elected official, happens to be, I don't know, Reza Mohammed is his name. And he says, I will refuse to give a marriage license to a same-sex couple because it's against Sharia law. Would conservative Christians go, yeah, we're behind you 100, and he gets put in jail because of contempt of court? Would conservative Christians go, yeah, that's right, we're behind you on that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so
they
either.
don't like Sharia law.
Right.
Well, that would be an interesting dilemma.
But what's the difference?
Right.
Because America is supposed to be Christian.
But if
Don't you remember?
if Sharia law says gay marriage is wrong, and the New Testament or the Christian scriptures say
they're opposing it for the wrong reason. They're supposed to be opposing.
But if the issue is religious,
it because of Jesus.
if it's religious liberty though, shouldn't that be it?
Well, and that's the problem that I have in that, if we start restricting stuff like that, then eventually it's going to turn on us.
That's right.
And that law is going to apply to us, and that's going to be bad.
What happens when there's let's say a gay tax official in a county, and a group of Christians go and say, we would like to apply for tax exempt status for a new church, and that gay official says, you know what, your belief system has persecuted LGBT people, and we don't consider that a tax exempt organization, and we're not going to give it to you.
Once again,
because it's against my beliefs.
Once again, you are forgetting that America is supposed to be Christian.
Wow.
By somebody's law sometime in the past. Okay. Speaking of Sharia law.
Ooh.
Not really, but kind of. Gardner, Louisiana, small town in Louisiana, had a scare. They had a scare this week because there was a sign posted in someone's yard that appeared to be in Arabic, and therefore it was assumed was a terrorist threat against the city.
There's two big assumptions there, correct?
One, it appeared to be in Arabic.
Yeah.
Number two, therefore, vis-a-vis must be a terrorist threat.
Did anyone bother to try to translate it to see what it said? It could have just been for a falafel stand or something, right?
Residents contacted both the local sheriff's department and the media to report, and I guess there was more than one sign in a yard, that were probably terrorist threats in Arabic. The signs were finally translated. They were not in Arabic.
It wasn't Klingon, was it?
It was in Hebrew.
Oh,
and
a Semitic language.
And the signs read, "Welcome home, Yamet."
Who's Yamet?
Someone's son who was coming home.
Is that the Hebrew version of Cotter?
Wow.
So let's talk about a little paranoia.
Wow.
Let me ask you this: did they feel better or worse with the knowledge that it was Jews living among them rather than Muslims?
And were they relieved, or was there a little part of them that was disappointed that this wasn't more exciting? And
well, the whole story sounds like...
Who knows? We're speculating.
It's just it's an evidence of the hysteria
You're
that's been
just
fueled.
a pot stir today.
I'm feeling a little rowdy.
I think we need to get out of the South.
Hey.
No, not.
Hey,
I'm saying
hey.
no. I mean, as our conversation is a little bit too focused on the
way,
South here.
Someone else in Texas has just recently restarted a secession movement. So once again, Texas is trying to secede.
That's okay.
Anyway, I think what would be interesting is if the secessionists in Texas actually succeeded in seceding. Say that 10 times fast.
Seceded in succeeding. Seceded in succeeding.
No, the other way around. Succeeded in seceding.
Succeeded in seceding.
Yeah. And then, so they actually left the United States of America, and then were immediately annexed by Mexico.
Well, they used to be part of Mexico.
I know. Wouldn't that be funny? You're now south of the border, and you hate immigrants. What fun!
Well, they're not immigrants anymore.
They're not immigrants. They're your kin.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's not even one of my stories. I just think it's interesting how often someone in Texas tries to secede from the Union because they love America. Update from New York.
What's happening in New York?
Remember, we got an update from New York.
Oh, the topless
got an update.
Women in Times Square.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Who I actually saw.
One of them was arrested. One of them was arrested this week. One of our listeners sent this in. It just happened, maybe yesterday.
Okay.
Was arrested for offering to sell a man drugs.
Where was she hiding them?
Good question.
And to perform a sex act for him for money.
Was this while she was in Times Square?
Yes.
Is that
It wasn't
really
like
true?
in her off hours or something?
No, while she was topless in Times Square.
Is that really true?
Not knowing that the man was an undercover New York City police officer.
Ah.
Yeah, it is true. And so she was arrested.
Wow.
So perhaps that the women that are doing that are slightly more sexual in nature than, the other movement of toplessness in New York.
Right.
Perhaps. And they're now, the number of women doing this, basically posing for topless photos with tourists for money, has doubled in the last year. And now on some days there are as many as 40.
No, I only saw 2 in Times Square. Like,
Yes.
I walked all over Times
That's a
Square for
problem.
3
Yeah.
days.
So when the mayor says, I
It's
think we need
becoming
to
a
do
problem.
something about this, you kind of understand, it's turning into something.
Turning into the old Times Square.
It's turning into the old Times Square. But what I also wanted to talk about, because I was thinking about this morning, we've been having a rousing conversation on the Facebook page. I don't know if you
Yes, we
noticed.
have.
We've had a rousing
and
conversation.
It keeps going.
And it keeps going.
Somebody said it's because I'm unemployed now that I have time.
Yes, you have time to weigh in.
Finally
which
weigh in.
actually is true.
Yeah, but it's actually not true in that I don't have more time. I found one of the issues interesting. And so,
Yes. So
I have to apologize. I haven't been on the Facebook all summer. I just read them when they come in my email. I'll jump back in the fray
that's
eventually.
sad. I'm holding down the fort.
Yes, I'm glad.
Engaging.
It is your Facebook page.
We're
Phil.
come
If anyone,
true.
if anyone would like to migrate
Just-
over to my Facebook
Or
page
mine.
and have a conversation,
Yeah, you can always reach me
Fine.
at Meet Christian Taylor on Facebook.
Well, we should just merge them all together and then.
like a podcast Facebook page.
Yeah.
We should have a podcast Facebook
Well,
page, but anyway.
that's kind of what it is.
I know.
It's
'Cause
because
you don't
I
do
don't
anything
use it
else
for
on it,
anything
right.
else.
Well, so
don't use it for
so
anything else.
where did it net
Okay.
out? I haven't
Here's-
checked in today.
Oh, well, Solomon, has given us, really, you should go read his latest essay on anthropology and modesty. But quite interesting kind of survey of different world standards of modesty and ancient standards of modesty. Apparently, he's a bit of an expert in modesty.
Well, is he a professor?
No.
No. Okay.
He's a structural engineer,
Okay.
which is a lot like a professor.
So how did he get all this knowledge?
He's traveled and he finds it interesting. And he grew up in a very high purity background.
A sexually repressed fundamentalist background. Right.
All sexuality is, to be only one tiny little context, and don't even think about it outside of that context. And he has said, and because he also worked as a youth pastor, and says he saw a lot of kids damaged by that controlled an environment and that tight a view of human
Well,
sexuality.
and I would agree with that because that was very similar to how I was raised in my little Southern Baptist enclave, and it has given me lots of trouble throughout my life because of that. So I hear.
So
what he's
anyway,
saying.
go on the Facebook page, read Solomon's posts. They're quite interesting. What I've been thinking about more, because I hear this more and more in culture, is the notion of these standards were all created by men and then applied to women. The notion that
Sort of like high heels.
in our
Well, and bras.
in our patriarchal society, men have oppressed, suppressed women and applied their moral standards to women.
Or sexualized them and exploited them. It's sort of one extreme or the other.
I think that is true.
Yeah.
What you just said.
Okay.
I would suggest that if you actually read history, almost the reverse is more true.
how so? What you talking about,
What's,
Willis?
what's the reverse?
What you
That,
talking about,
women
Willis?
have imposed their own.
That women have exerted more moral influence on our culture than men.
In American history, they used to call this Republican motherhood.
Ooh.
Do you know what that is?
Well, it's where all the mothers are Republican.
No, it's not Republican in the political sense, but to be citizens of a republic. Republican motherhood was an idea prior.
Sort of like it takes a village.
Well, it was the idea that prior to women being empowered to vote or have any real public square influence, the way they would influence the country is as a wife and as a mother. So you could essentially control your husband through your sexuality, and you can control your children because you have power over them, and your job is to
use the tools at your disposal
right, to
in order to control and affect the people's thoughts.
Right. So your contribution to the republic is through your motherhood and your femininity.
Mind control.
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about
brainwashing everyone you have influence over.
In a time when women didn't have direct control over things, that was the primary way they exerted influence.
Right.
So
go back. Let's go back in time, shall we?
Let's go in the way back machine.
Okay, early 1800s. So America is new. America is growing. Thomas Jefferson and Adams are still alive. Mm-hmm. They both died in 25.
On the 4th of July.
On the 4th of July, same day in 1825. So the founding fathers are literally still alive.
Okay.
America is new. In 1840, so 15 years after the last founding fathers died, in New York City, 10% of the women who lived in New York City in 1840, which was quickly becoming the largest city in the country, worked in prostitution.
10%?
10%.
Wow.
So yeah.
I'm sort of having the same trouble. Like, I've had my kids' school call me, 2 different kids' schools call me twice during this podcast.
I'm trying to do a podcast
I'm
here.
sorry.
I'm trying to do a podcast
I think I need you to start over. While he's on his phone, can you give me, what are we talking about?
So 1840, I don't know if it was the biggest city in America at that time, either, or the second biggest. Philadelphia, I believe, was the biggest for the first chunk of American history. But it was the fastest growing city in America. 10% of the women in New York were prostitutes. Why? Because New York was growing because of the Industrial Revolution, and there were lots of male immigrants coming in.
And they weren't getting sex at home?
Factories.
They weren't married.
Many of them were single.
Yeah.
So you had a large population of single men, and whenever you have a large population of single men, you have prostitution. For example, right now in North Dakota, because of the shale oil boom, there are lots of single men moving to North Dakota.
Which isn't booming anymore, by the way.
Right, well, not this month.
Yeah.
And there's an explosion of strip clubs and prostitution.
Really?
And think about the Wild West. The Wild West, think about saloons in the Wild West.
Right,
There
the
was
gold rush.
Yeah, there was a brothel.
Or when there's large army encampments and bases and things.
Right,
Yeah.
so as long as there have been men and women...
The thing is, women choose to make money by selling themselves.
Oh, wait a minute.
No, seriously, it makes me mad.
Wait,
it makes me mad.
wait.
How can you say, you know what, I'm mad at everybody, and I think, we shouldn't have prostitution when you have these women deciding that to give themselves away.
I can't believe that I'm going to be...
I'm sure I'm going to get in so much trouble now.
Christian.
What?
You take this one, Phil.
Okay. Through most of human history, prostitution was the only option for a bottom of the social rung woman other than destitution. That's why people freak out in the Bible. In Leviticus, there's actually a law for how a man should handle it when he sells his daughter into slavery. When you sell your daughter into slavery, here's what you need to do. And people flip out about that, right?
Well, I would.
Are you flipping out?
I'm flipping out right now. I didn't know that.
And I go talk to atheists, and they throw that out. Well, how can you? The Bible's terrible. It says it's okay for a father.
Why does it say that?
Okay, because that was better. If you were a poor father and you were going to die before long, you had to supply the needs of your daughters in some way. Typically, it was to get them married.
Right.
But you needed a dowry to get them married. A poor father could not get his daughters married because he didn't have any money.
Okay.
And it took money to get your daughters married. If you didn't get your daughters married, their only option was prostitution because you couldn't have a single woman household in the ancient world. So
Okay.
you had the choice, prostitution, and we think about slavery. We always think about slavery in terms of 19th century, 18th century African slave trade, ancient world, closer to indentured servitude. They were bond servants, which is why some versions of the Bible translated as bondservant and not as slave. But to set up your daughters as a bondservant, basically you were putting them in someone else's household as a servant.
And they'd be careful.
Well, that sounds a little more palatable.
So that they would be taken care for.
All right. I get
This, ironically, is why we set out stockings at Christmas time.
What? Phil, what are you talking about?
Okay, because this tradition was still true in the 4th century AD when St. Nicholas lived. That there was no social security, there was no welfare. So if you were on the bottom rung of humanity, you would end up in slavery.
Okay.
You would end up as a bondservant
And
somewhere.
that has to do with stockings. Why?
Because the story of the 3 daughters of a poor father who didn't have enough money for a dowry to get his daughters married, so his only choice was to sell them into slavery to become bondservants. St. Nicholas didn't want that to happen, so he walked by their window at night and anonymously threw in 3 bags of money for dowries for the daughters, which supposedly fell into their stockings that they had left out to dry, which is the legend of St. Nicholas.
Is that true?
That is,
Yes,
yeah.
and
that
Santa
is
Claus and the stockings.
That's a real true story.
Well, it's a true.
It's
the legend of Saint Nicholas that
Well,
we
is
then
the
get.
legend true?
Well, nobody knows. It was 400 AD.
Yeah.
Were you there?
But
I
that's
was
where
not there.
that's where the origin of the.
So that's the origin of stockings.
right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
the origin of
So
stockings.
where were we? How did we get
Okay,
here?
wait.
Connected
Before
to-
you go
okay.
back, one other thing though about your women
Yes.
prostitute thing.
Your women.
Maybe there are.
You and your women.
Maybe there are a handful, small percentage of prostitutes out there who are just choosing to do it, but we forget that an awful lot of the women are trafficked. You know, they are forced into this by someone else who's exploiting them. And
Usually a man.
usually it is a
True.
man. But so you
All right,
can't
I
just say all
stand-
these
I
prostitutes
stand
are
rebuked.
so
I stand rebuked.
These women are
I'm
victims,
wrong.
not just.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
so
everybody.
For all of human history, there have been women either forced to or begrudgingly willing to take off their clothes for money. This has been true always. So now we get, but you had to have money, and to have, and men have always been attracted, well, gee, I want the really pretty one. I don't have enough money. Then we get to not modern cities, but we're in the early 19th century in London, in Philadelphia, in New York, in the cities that are really growing, in Boston that are becoming commercialized. And so what we get for the first time is mass entertainment for a working class. Because before the Industrial
You're
Revolution.
talking about vaudeville-ish.
Ish. Yeah.
And burlesque.
Yes, because before the Industrial Revolution, the working class didn't have free time and didn't have free money. Yeah, so now for the first time, and also didn't live in big clumps unless they were really, really impoverished. If you were just the working class, you were agrarian and you were rural. Now suddenly we have a working class in urban environments, in large concentrations, who have free time, Friday night, they get paid, and they actually want some entertainment. So that led to, on one hand, a tremendous amount of drinking. And the average American in 1820, drank like 3 times as much alcohol as the average American does today.
Wow.
I mean, it just consumed copious
Which
quantities
is why
of whiskey.
Prohibition
Yes.
was born.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which was a women's movement.
Yes, because you know why? They were Republican mothers.
You're going to run with that.
That's Republican lowercase r.
So we want to entertain all these men. There just aren't enough prostitutes in the world, and they don't have that much money. So we do burlesque. And you
Right.
see burlesque theaters, which are basically strip teases. The birth of the fan dance. The fan dance was the hit of the Chicago World's Fair.
Right.
A woman coming out wearing nothing but 2 big feathery fans and then flirting with them and revealing parts of her body, and men go nuts. So this is, 1880s. That was like the huge hit, was fan dances. Men and women never went to these forms of entertainment. These were not, because women didn't go to saloons either because they weren't allowed. Women could not enter a saloon. So if you see in a Western women walking into the saloon, that didn't happen. They weren't for women.
Well, I saw in a lot of those Westerns, they have like
floozies.
girls of the
they
evening.
have floozies.
Right.
With the floofy skirts. like in France, they're doing the can-can.
Moulin Rouge.
Oh, oui, oui. I've been burned by you before. And wearing little French maid outfits. Okay, so entertainment really starts in the Western world as a way to entertain and divert, as a diversion for working men.
Okay.
Which is why it's so, entertainment is so heavily focused around pretty women, basically. So now Thomas Edison comes along. Thomas Edison says, I almost gave him a German accent. He's not German. He didn't have an accent. He says, I think I know how to make moving pictures. Okay, so he invents the motion picture camera.
He does.
What are the first things that people pointed at? Women undressing.
Yeah. He made a lot of money on that.
And they make these little, 60-second loops that are put in machines that are called Nickelodeons. They set them up in the front lobbies of burlesque theaters. And now a guy can come in after work, put another nickel in the Nickelodeon, put a nickel in a Nickelodeon, and without anyone knowing what he's watching, these are basically the first peep shows.
Yeah.
Puts his eyes into the little thing and sees a reel. And some of them were like fan dances, but some of them were literally just a woman undressing, like at the end of a workday, not knowing pretending like she doesn't know she's being watched.
Right.
And so guys are flocking to these pumping in nickels, which launches the movie industry. But now what happens? So the movie industry is basically launched around feeding men's
sexual appetite,
prurient interests.
I didn't even know that word. Prurient?
Thank you.
What is that?
Prurient.
Prurient.
That's part of the definition of pornography in the code is imagery targeting prurient interests.
Who knew?
Yeah. So now we get to 1850-ish, and upper-class women are starting to see where the country is going, and they don't like it. And they don't like the saloons, because what they're seeing is working men in cities, going to the saloons, getting drunk, cheating on their wives, going home, beating them, and they see women, young, lower-class wives, out on the streets begging for food for their kids because their husbands have spent all the money they've made on liquor and on
Sounds like
prostitutes.
a terrible time.
And so women, upper-class Christian women, rise up and form groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which was formed in 1850, I think, to try to do something about that. Upper-class women start to try to reform.
Was the Salvation Army part of that?
I don't
think so.
No. We'd have to look up Salvation Army.
I'm sure they didn't disagree
Unfortunately, they can't get very far on their own because they can't vote.
Right.
And
so that's when the voting movement is born.
So parallel to that is the women's suffrage movement, which is also, for the most part, upper-class Christian women.
You rock on, ladies.
Now they need help. So who do they get? I mean, why did prohibition happen? Because the women couldn't do it on their own because they couldn't vote.
Upper-class Christian men.
Pastors.
Clergy.
Pastors. So prominent clergymen, and there was one prominent, I believe it was a Presbyterian minister, who the Women's Christian Temperance Union didn't have enough political clout. So this guy, partnering with them, started the ASL, the Anti-Saloon League. And
That doesn't sound like it's going to go very far.
Actually, that's what ultimately got prohibition passed. Was the ASL. Because the ASL was politically connected, and the ASL was driven by men who had political power and political connections. And so it was a partnership between the Christian women of the Women's Temperance Union, the pastors of the ASL, and wealthy business owners like Henry Ford. Why would Henry Ford be interested in prohibition?
Because he wanted more efficient workers.
Yes.
Because he didn't want people to wreck his cars.
No, because then they'd have to buy a new one. It was because of how many hours they were losing in factories due to alcoholism.
It goes back to economics.
Yeah. Yes. So business interests got into it because of the loss of productivity. So it was clergy, wealthy businessmen, and wealthy Christian women who had disposable time, and moral outrage.
So can I just ask one question?
Yes.
How did we get here? What were we talking about that led us down this road?
Solomon's argument that men had imposed upon women.
Actually, that was Ben's argument.
Was it? I don't know.
But it's also, you see it in the Free the Nipple movement of men are requiring us to stay covered. And
So
we
what
women,
are you saying with all this story?
in 1880, there were more than 300 legal brothels in the city limits of Chicago.
Right, I did know that.
Today, there are 0 legal brothels in the city limits of Chicago. What happened and today, the average American drinks a third to a quarter the alcohol that the average American drank in 1820. What happened between then and now is women got involved and gained political power and reformed the morals of America. So I'm rejecting a bit the notion that men have done all of this. That men can take really any responsibility.
Well, there is a stereotype
for
that,
the Reformation.
that men are barbaric and women are the civilizing force in our species.
Well, that's true.
Which is,
It is.
There are exceptions.
I think it is
but
a little bit true.
At the core.
Who's the head of the International
so-
Monetary Fund?
it's what's her name?
Christine Lagarde.
Lagarde, right?
Why is she the head of the International
Because her
Monetary
predecessor was raping women.
Because her
Hotel.
predecessor, who was also in line to be the next head of France, was in a hotel in New York City and hid in his bathroom naked, and when the maid came in, he jumped on her.
But isn't that a prerequisite to being elected president of France?
Oh, my word.
Wait, but hold on.
Sky has something to say
So
about
here's
this.
my question.
You have a question for Phil?
Or just whoever.
Oh, good.
If in the late 19th century, early 20th century, women were the driving force behind the modesty and the reformation of morals and all that other good stuff, when you look at our culture today and where we're at, the Miley Cyruses, whatever, the proliferation of pornography, the nipples all over the place in Times Square.
Now you're getting to what bothers me. Because I do feel like women are choosing that lifestyle and saying, this is okay for me. And so, as a mother of 4 boys, I feel like my sons are constantly assaulted by these visual images of girls at school wearing shorts too tight for their butts and too short, and shirts that are cut too low, and they're looking on television at XYZ and billboards. I can't even drive down I-80 without seeing all of this half naked stuff in the billboards.
Okay, but
women are choosing that.
Okay, but this is my question. Are they choosing it because in general, let me cut to the chase. Is this the outcome of the feminist movement?
Why do you say that?
Well, because, a lot of the women's movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s was about modesty and proper behavior and restraining the appetites of men. But by the 1960s and 70s, it became a very different kind of movement for women, which was a liberation movement. And there's obviously, it's a mixed bag. A lot of good things came of that too. But is there a sense, has the role of women in society changed to the point where they no longer are functioning in the way they did a century ago in restraining
men
appetites and men, but in fact unleashing them and saying, men, you need to restrain yourselves now?
I think
there's a war between the two. Today, I think you have. I think that's why there's this animosity between the Christian evangelical moral group of women, whether they're. I mean, that's even true in the Muslim world.
Here's another angle, because mass entertainment in America was born to attract the diversionary time of working men. In the urban centers, mass entertainment in America has from the beginning featured beautiful women very prominently. As it spread more and that families started coming into mass entertainment, it doesn't really matter that who's it? Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire is not an enormously handsome man, but that didn't matter. because he was a heck of a dancer.
Right.
Ginger Rogers had to be beautiful.
Well, this is this double standard that's
and
always
a heck
existed.
of a dancer because that's the standard of modern entertainment in America going back to its roots.
Just look at news.
But I know, and the more...
There's so many ugly men in the news.
And the more mass entertainment grows, the more it reinforces that standard that the only women that are valuable are the ones that are in this amazing slice, of visual appeal, whereas men can be valuable for a lot of different reasons. And the most ridiculous, the picture a few weeks ago of Adam Sandler, Kevin James, and Selena Gomez at one of the premieres for the movie Pixels, I think. They were all next to each other. Adam Sandler and Kevin James were in baggy shorts and baggy T-shirts. Looked like they just walked in from the gym. Selena Gomez in the middle of them was in this slinky, revealing red satin dress like she was at the Oscars, looking incredibly awkward, and people kind of went nuts at the double standard. It's like, so those guys can walk the red carpet looking like they just got up off the couch and would have crumbs on their T-shirts, and she, has to look like a beauty queen.
Right.
And that's what American pop culture has done to gender since the beginning, because it started out as something solely for the entertainment of men, but has now become complete. And it only existed in major urban areas. There was no pop culture, in rural America.
Yeah, but the attraction of men to scantily clad, beautiful women didn't begin with mass entertainment. It's been there for a long time.
But you couldn't before high quality reproduction of imagery, most men would never see a woman that beautiful in their lifetime.
Right.
So they had no idea how extreme beauty could go.
Okay.
Well, and I would also say they probably couldn't see that many women naked that easily.
Except for prostitutes.
Right.
Who were not very attractive.
But it's sort of like it's a lot harder to get yourself to go outside.
Yeah.
You're paying money. It's not, and I'm sure there are a lot of men based on those inhibitors that didn't go down that way.
One of the big commercial agents behind the promotion of idealized women is advertising.
Right.
I think that's obvious.
Which was born at the same time, the late 1800s.
Yes, but when it was born, you didn't have the ability to reproduce high-quality images. They were mostly text-based advertising. When I was a kid and I would go to Wendy's restaurants, they all started. They were trying to be, kind of Victorian in their stylings.
I remember that.
Yeah, and the tables were linoleum,
newspapers.
and they were old newspapers with all the ads.
Yeah.
And there were almost zero images in the ads because the printing technology couldn't reproduce an image.
I remember that.
You could just reproduce text. So if you lived, even if you read the newspapers and were completely immersed in what was media of 1880, you saw very few images of unrealistically idealized women. And then once you get to 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, suddenly those images start popping up everywhere. And now guys are painting them on the front of their airplanes as they go into war, and hanging up centerfolds of women, in their lockers at school, and women become objectified on a massive scale that didn't exist before the ability to reproduce high-quality imagery. Now that every male on the planet has a smartphone in their pocket, it's like, how do you go back?
But aren't you kind of validating the argument from the Facebook page that it is the desires of men that are imposed upon women that have led us to our views of modesty?
No, not modesty.
Well, it's sort of the inverse. We know what is immodest, so... because we know what men want.
No, I think the negative influence of men in this regard, and it's institutionalized through advertising and entertainment, is that this is what a woman is supposed to look like. Not necessarily she's supposed to be naked, because that's historically a fairly small portion of acceptable entertainment. although it's growing at an amazing rate. But so even 1950s television, women are very modestly dressed in 1950s television. Jimmy Smith was the first person to ever expose their buttocks on television in NYPD Blue.
I didn't
know
No,
that.
Hill Street Blues. Hill Street Blues, and it was revolutionary. A man exposing his buttocks on network television.
Wow. I didn't know
Try
that.
to imagine. Try to imagine. Dick,
No, I don't want to imagine.
no, Dick Van Dyke, 1960s. The Dick Van Dyke Show exposing his butt. That's ludicrous.
But I could see him doing it,
But
drops his towel,
The women.
laughs about it,
The women,
making it funny.
even in that show, were hyper attractive. You just because that's what women were supposed to look like in entertainment.
Right.
So, and that's not about modesty. So I think there's two different issues. There's what is modest or immodest, and then there is what is idealized and promoted as acceptable.
Right, which is what then leads to all kinds of self-image problems for women and
and I would
girls.
think that
I keep saying I want to go back to Michelangelo's time because I would be beautiful. I mean, I would be like rock star status.
here's the thing,
in
I've
his
always
time.
wondered
have you
this.
seen his David? I mean, that guy was
Yeah.
cut.
He
If
was.
you,
Yeah.
I wonder,
I actually just recently saw it.
Yeah, that guy was cut.
if we could go back in time, I've always wondered what would strike us the most as unexpected or weird or you hadn't thought about. I think there's two things that would bother me.
Okay.
One is people's
going with
lack
this?
of personal hygiene,
Oh gosh, yes, trust
which
me.
you can actually go to many places
I
in
went
the
to
world
France
today.
and thought I was
Yeah.
going to choke.
And the other thing is how bad people's teeth would be.
Yeah. Well, it's still that way in some places.
You're going to name them?
No.
No,
I was thinking England, but
Yeah, that's what actually what I was going to say.
But no, really, think about
but
how
it's part of their culture now.
bad dentistry was.
Yeah.
So you might see a beautiful person,
you-
and then they smile, and you're like, oh my word.
Can you try to bring this back to our
I keep
theme
thinking
of
about
the day in
what-
some way?
Hang on, I keep thinking about the Middle Ages, right? Like think about
Like
the
40s and
you have
50s?
both of those things. No, like you have the Middle Ages of people like they never showered, they didn't use deodorant, their teeth were horrible, they never. I mean,
Yeah, and they also
yuck.
died by the time they were 30.
How could they be attracted to each other with all that grossness going on?
My point. Can I say what my
Yeah,
point
what is your point?
That I think we should and can separate the topic of modesty from the topic of idealized feminine beauty. Because they're not necessarily the same. I mean, you can objectify women that are fully dressed.
I can see that they're not necessarily the same, but what are you saying is men's fault? Or
So you're saying that our standards of modesty we really have to attribute to women from the 1800s impose
in the high
these
standards,
I-
yeah.
okay, but the idealization of the female form
Yeah.
is a male-driven thing.
It's a commercially male.
So you're making the argument that it's about money.
Yes, it is.
I have
Sky wins again.
I have converted you.
It is about money.
Bless you, my son.
I only want to buy a car if they show me what kind of beautiful woman would be attracted to me if I'm driving that car.
Which pretty much explains all Corvette sales.
Yeah, it does. I want a song about it's all about the money.
Oh. Okay, I hope that helps. And
I don't think that helps at all.
Do go to the Facebook page and read some of Solomon's stuff about modesty because it's quite interesting.
And please don't yell at me for like the things that I said during this podcast because I learned over the podcast and now
In fact, don't yell at any of us about anything
Yeah, we appreciate that.
we've ever said or ever will say
And
because it hurts our feelings.
particularly for Christian and myself, keep in mind that Phil gives us no advance warning on what he's going
Ever.
to say or what the
Ever.
stories
We're
will
like,
be.
you
So
know.
we are talking trash.
and we don't get paid. So and we're really nice people
Usually.
usually.
So tell me, honey, why is it always just about the money? Is it modest to keep your clothes on in a culture where maybe noses are the things that are considered immodest that day? So it doesn't matter what we show or say, but still we can try to not idealize all the women when we realize that it's just not realistic to say that everyone female's supposed to look that way. So take a really average-looking gal and put her on a billboard and call her your pal.
Like me.
You're not average.
I'm
looking.
so average.
What is
I'm under
average? What is?
I don't know.
Well,
but I still would like to be on a billboard because I'd get paid.
That's fantastic. And come back next week. Come back to the show because there's just no telling where the conversation's gonna go.
Amen to that.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.